Welcome to the Tailgate Podcast with your host, Al Blanton. At Tailgate, we celebrate the rich history of sports in the state of Alabama. So come with us as we relive great moments, great games, great players and coaches, and in the process, preserve memories for a lifetime. So I saw a pretty neat post on social media today. You guys had your 40-year reunion last night at Neville
Yes,
Arena.
we did.
And
Yes.
you got to spend some time with Charles Barkley and Gary Godfrey. What was that like for you?
Well, it's always a thrill for me. Charles is one of the best. Well, he's probably the best player ever played for me. You know, he's a Hall of Famer. And Gary Godfrey is a young man that was on the bench at the time that Charles was playing. His name is Gary Godfrey. He was a straight A student, and I used to tell him, "You're on here to keep the grade point average of the team up," and he certainly did that. And he now has ALS, and we use him a lot to talk about. But he was a member of the team, and they used to have a deal up there where Gary was like the most important guy on the team because he didn't get to play. So they'd start this chant hollering, "We want Gary, we want Gary." The crowd would. So I'd call Gary up there and I'd say, "Gary, go up there and see what they want." And he would, he said, "I don't know how to do that, coach." But I said, "Go up there and see what they want." But that became a national thing. They used to talk about Gary. We want Gary all the time. Gary was a guy that never got to play. And I told him, "You're on here to get grade point average up on the team."
What's the conversation like when you and Charles get together?
Charles, I was awfully tough on Charles, and our relationship was not standoffish, but not as close as it would be for, say, Chuck Person or Chris Morris or some of the other big stars that I had. But he loved my wife. My wife was like his mother, and because of her, he stayed with me because I was awfully tough on Charles because I saw what he could be. And I wanted to make sure that he knew, and he wanted to do it his way, like not practice, not really work hard, but win the game for you. That was the way he was. Well, I was too old school to go for that. So I drove him, as some people say, like a rented mule. And our relationship was a little salty even at the time he went away to the pros, but it's great now. And then we were together last night.
Do y'all talk mostly basketball, or are there other topics that come up?
Well, we talk about anything that he wants to talk about. He loves my wife. We talk about the family first, and then we talk about the things that he's doing and all the things that he's involved in. He's involved in so many things. He can't tell me all of them, but we have a great relationship. It's better now than it was years and years ago when I was driving him too hard.
You may not know this, and I can probably drop a name on you in a second. I used to be a basketball coach. I was a head coach at Bevel State in Jasper, and you probably knew Coach Clem.
Really?
Yeah.
Glenn Clem, Lord, yes, I remember him.
So I'm a former coach, and I have my opinions about the Alabama Auburn, the first game in the Alabama Auburn series this year. But I
Hmm.
want to hear your take on it. What do you think were the keys to Auburn's victory, and what were your thoughts about the game?
Well, Bruce Pearl, he he does a great job of pregame situations, getting himself ready to go, taking the scouting report and breaking it down. His son does a great job on that, and they're always ready for the things that a team will do. And I think they were ready for Alabama, but Alabama's definitely ready for them. The game is definitely was going to have to be decided by the players, because both coaches were outstanding.
It seems like that Auburn really did a great job defensively, tightening up and not letting Alabama have dribble penetration, and then just Bama didn't shoot the ball well. I mean, that was, to me, that was kind of the key to the game. What would you say to that?
I would say that that's a trait of Bruce Pearl. Take away the dribble, keep them out of the grooves in the defense. You know, where the people who dribble the gaps that get inside of defense, they try to keep them out by guarding the dribble extremely well, and that's a trait of Bruce Pearl's defenses. Keep them out of the gaps, keep them out of the groove, so to speak.
You've been in the middle of this rivalry. I mean, you've been right in the middle of it, and
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to be almost pinching yourself about how good this rivalry has become, and really
Well,
how good Auburn has become over the last few years.
it's really great for me because Wimp and I it was Wimp and Sonny type thing, and it was a big deal in this state because we got after each other all the time on with the media. Well, our record was 5-5. He won 5 and I won 5, so we don't really have a lot of bragging rights because we ended up 500. So that's just Wimp and Sonny show in the state of Alabama, 500.
You know, how likely is it? I mean, you don't want to think, too much down the road, but how likely is it that these two teams could meet in the national title game this year? I was talking to a buddy of mine at church last night, and he's an Auburn fan, and we were talking, and I mean, they could end up playing for the national title. How likely is that?
It's two great coaches with extremely good players. I say the only thing that could keep either one what might keep either one of them out would be the bench or injuries. I think I think through seven, both teams are qualified, are good enough to make it to the Final Four. That's my opinion. It might not be the opinion of a lot of people, but that's the way I feel. They're good enough. They're solid in all aspects, offensively, defensively, game planning. They're very, very good.
I guess in a way, the pinnacle of the Alabama Auburn rivalry for you and Wimp was probably the '85 SEC tournament game, the
Yeah.
championship game of the tournament. And
Right.
when we were interviewing before, you mentioned to me that at that point you were kind of thinking about maybe leaving Auburn.
I
But
was. I was.
you come into the tournament, you're an 8 seed, you end up winning the whole thing. What led to the change of heart, to stay after the conclusion of that tournament?
It's funny. It's hard to believe the answer I'm going to give you. I had an agent, a guy named Jimmy Taylor, was a banker in Birmingham, Alabama, and he'd been a basketball coach over the years. And he came to me after this and he said, Sonny, you can't leave here. You've got something established. You need to stay here. And I was pretty much ready to go because I thought I wasn't ever going to get it going to the point that I would be happy. But I decided to stay because of this guy. He was a former coach at South Alabama. His name is Jimmy Taylor, and he was a banker in Birmingham. And I brought him down always. He was my confidant, I guess. If I needed to go to somebody, he was the guy I would go to.
You mentioned your relationship with Wimp, and when I interviewed you for
Yeah.
the piece, he said that you played the role of the smiling hillbilly, and he played the role of the frowning grouch. Is that about right?
That's pretty obvious. Yeah, he got that right, and so did I. Yes, that's the way it was. We played that role really well. Wimp Wimp was a great coach. He really was, and we were pretty good too. At that time, I thought basketball was at a high point in this state. It reached a point where we both were uh, teams that could go a long way in the tournament, and basketball was thought of at a higher state than it had not been in a couple of years, few years.
And I feel like the rivalry really trickled down to the players too. When you think about Chuck Person and Buck Johnson, and
Yeah.
say to that.
Well, I would say this that as we started to get better, we started to be able to keep the players in the state of Alabama. So it's a battle between Alabama and Auburn to get the better players, and we ended up kind of splitting the state in a lot of ways. So we were both playing with players from the state of Alabama, the high schools in Alabama, and that made the rivalry a little bit stronger because of that. He had Alabama players and I did. Usually we'd been going out and getting players out of other states, Florida, for instance, for me, and junior colleges and that type of thing. Well, we started getting these in-state players, and he started getting more in-state players too. So we were kind of controlling the state between the two of us, and the rivalry got a lot bigger because of that. In my opinion, it might not be the opinion of a lot of people.
I want to I want to go back to Roan Mountain, Tennessee.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay, go right ahead.
I mean, I'm just interested in this. I'm interested. I'm a, I'm kind of an old school guy. I'm interested in
Yeah.
history and geography and things like that. And so, all right. So it's my understanding is it's kind of right there on the North Carolina line,
On the North Carolina border, yes,
right
it
there.
is. We were in the area of Southwest. Well, I don't. Western North Carolina was right there, and we were in East Tennessee, and Southwest Virginia was right on top of us. We were right there in that corner. So I don't know if I'm answering your question properly, but we were borderliners, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, my question was paint me a picture of what life was like back then, growing up in that area. What were some of your fondest memories of growing up in Roan Mountain?
Having a radio sounds crazy now. Having a radio that worked so I could listen to country music. Then I could listen to basketball games that were played and keep my interest in life growing up was I either wanted to be a country music performer or I wanted to be a basketball coach. And because of those two things, a radio at my house when my dad would just listen because it had tubes and they'd burn them out if you let it too much. And he was really a very tight individual, if you know what I mean. He wouldn't let you listen to up. So when I listened either to the Grand Ole Opry or basketball games, and that was my growing up in Rome Mountain. And my ambition was to be one of the two. And actually, I sung on the Grand Ole Opry, and I was thinking, man, maybe I might make this thing, but I wasn't quite good enough. But so I became a basketball coach. But if I'd had my druthers growing up, I'd have been a country music entertainer.
Who were some of the guys you listened to? Hank Williams. I mean, I don't know that many.
Uh,
More of a
Hank
'90s
Williams was
country
big.
guy.
Sonny James was big. Hank Williams was big. Uh, Vern Gosdin was really my
Wow.
all-time favorite.
Yeah,
He's an Alabama
he's
guy.
from like Cottondale, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He's it ended up most of my favorite singers are from Alabama. The group Alabama.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite groups. In fact, I got to know all those guys. And I did one tour thing with them, and it was a lot of fun.
You
I'm
could
I'm,
start.
I'm still
You ought to start a
I'm
group
still
now,
heavily engrossed in country music. By the way,
sir.
I'm still hung up on country music. I'll tell you that right.
The
That's never
the
changed.
the new country, or like what, like current?
No, I'm borderline on that one.
Yeah.
I'll jump to bluegrass before I'd go to the new country.
I'm like almost exclusively '90s country.
Yeah, well, that would be me. That would be me. See,
I'm
I had guys that I were my favorites, guys that I would want to go see, and guys I wanted to meet. They took me in the dressing room and introduced me to Vern Gosdin. That's one of the biggest thrills I ever had for a long time.
So what got you started playing basketball? When did you start? And I guess I'm assuming you played all throughout your childhood and high school career.
I lived 100 yards from the high school, and I played every day that we would pull the window up and go in there and practice until they caught us and run us out. So so I got to play a lot of basketball illegally. When school was out, we'd go in the gym and practice. I did that. That's where I absolutely learned to play basketball, basically on my own. I would watch things that would happen on television at times that I could see them, and Dad would let us see them, and I would try to copy the things they would do.
Was Kentucky basketball? I mean, I know it was such a huge deal, but like, I mean, you're fairly close to it, being where you're
But
from. But was that the biggest
Kentucky was
deal?
big. Kentucky was big, but right in the area that we were, North Carolina teams were absolutely the biggest team. Duke, North Carolina, and say even into Virginia. Those and Tennessee was really big, but not so much. East Tennessee was not eaten up with the University of Tennessee like the rest of the state was. So we probably were right on the borderline of North Carolina. A lot of North Carolina and Duke fans, a lot of Virginia Tech and Virginia fans on the other side.
Were you able to go to any games? Do you remember your
Oh
first
yeah.
college basketball
Well,
game that you went to?
we had a guy in town that was he wanted to see the kids that lived in that town find a way out and see how things were on the outside. He would put three of us or four of us in a car. He would drive us to the Tennessee games to show us how basketball is played at Tennessee. He'd take us to East Tennessee State. He took us to North Carolina. He never did take us to the University of North Carolina, but he took us to a Wake Forest game. And so I got to see some of those things because we had a man in Roan Mountain that wanted to see the kids get out of there and become something in their life. And I still look back on how much he did for me.
I'm kind of a junior college guy, and you ended up going to Holmes Community College in
I
Mississippi.
did.
How did
I'm
that
a
come
junior
about?
college man. I'm a junior college guy too. I recruited the junior colleges heavily, even though that sometimes there was a lot of criticism that went with that. Instead of going for the 4-year guy and carrying them, I took a lot of junior college players in my time, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that I was one.
Yeah. How'd you get to Holmes Community College?
I played in a little old tournament in a town called Siam up by Elizabethton, if you're familiar with that name. And a guy from Holmes Junior College was a teacher in that there, and he was home visiting his parents in Siam, which is, if you know about Elizabethton, Tennessee, is right outside of that. And he said, "You're a pretty good basketball player." I said, "Do you have any scholarships?" I said, "No." They won't even look at me. I'm 170 pounds, 6'4". They ain't nobody going to take me. I was too skinny. He said, "Well, if you'll get in the car with me, and like on a 2 or 3 days from that time, I'll take you to Holmes Junior College and I'll make sure they give you a full scholarship." Well, I didn't have any offers. I'd played in a little tournament in Siam, which is somewhere around Elizabeth, and I played really good. And the only reason I played better than I was in high school is I had rheumatic fever and missed a lot of my high school career. And then after that, I became kind of a legend around there, and the points that I could score in all those independent tournaments and things. And from that, I ended up going to a junior college in Mississippi, Holmes Junior College, and I made all state there. And then I went to Milligan, which was a school up in Johnson City, Tennessee, and was a leading scorer there with a guy named Dale Harris. You probably heard that name. We both we both ended up scoring major college coaches, and he ended up in the pros, but he ended up in the pros because of me. I was offered a job in Grenoble, France. They had moved the ABA as a part of Europe, and I took the job in Grenoble, France. It got time to go. I think I was assistant maybe at Virginia Tech. I'm not sure. I got time to go. I got cold feet. And I said, "I don't want to go." I told the guy. He said, "You got to go. The season starts in a week." I said, "I'm not coming." And they talked about suing me. And then he said, "Well, if you'll get me a coach, I'll let you off." And I called Dale Harris. You know that name, Dale Harris?
Yes, sir.
Well, I said, "Dale, would you like to coach in Grenoble, France? You want to be a pro?" He said, "Yeah." He took it, and he went from there to Olympic team in Puerto Rico to somewhere in Spain coaching, and ended up as a head coach of the Rockets and Dallas Mavericks and that type of thing. He was my college roommate. I started on a team with 4 preachers. I really knew how to pray. I just didn't have to do it.
Now you started out at William and Mary.
Yes,
What was that experience like?
as a coach,
Yes, sir.
I was a speaker in the at the Virginia High School Association for Coaches in the summertime, and the coach there was there, and he said to me, he said, "If you'll come work in my camp, I'll get you into college coaching." Well, I went to his camp, worked like 2 years, and finally I walked into his office and I said to him, "Now this guy was coaching at Duke at the time." uh, I said, you said you're going to get me into college. I said, but you haven't. He said, well, you haven't asked. I said, well, I'm asking now. He reached in the drawer and pulled out a name, said, call this number. And the guy was the head coach at William and Mary named Warren Mitchell. I was going to Warren. I took the job there and I replaced Hubie Brown. You remember that name?
Yes, sir.
I replaced Hubie Brown at William and Mary, and that's how I got into college because of working in the camps.
And then you end up going out to California. So, as
The
well.
reason I went, yeah, the reason I went to California was I was working in Duke University's basketball camp. Vic Bubas was the head coach. The guy working with me there was a guy named Gary Colson, who played basketball at Lipscomb College in Nashville, but he was the head coach at Pepperdine. He said, Sonny, if you'll come out to Pepperdine, I'll make you an assistant. And I was thinking, I'm working at William and Mary for $7,000 a year, and he doubled my salary. So Jan and I packed up, moved to Pepperdine University, which was in Los Angeles. I didn't even know how to drive through red lights. My sister lived in California, but I
Was
did
it
it.
like the Beverly Hillbillies going out there with
Oh Lord, I
the
was not, they even call me that at times. It's funny you would say that. And two of the players that I took with me were from real small towns in Indiana, and they needed a lot. They needed a lot of help too, boy. They had to teach us how to dress, how to talk, how to eat in restaurants and all that stuff. But I learned a lot at Pepperdine, and we won. We had a guy named Bert Avery who was the best player in Kentucky, but he didn't know the answer to hello, so we worked on his transcript and got him in. If you know what I mean.
did
He
you
he played at Pepperdine. He played in the NBA, ABA for a number of years and was a real high scorer. Bert Avery was his name. That probably doesn't jump out at you, but he was a great player.
did you like Los Angeles?
My wife loved Los Angeles. I hated it. I stayed on the road all the time because I didn't know how to drive in the traffic in Los Angeles. Hey, I didn't know how to merge on the freeway. First time I was there, I think maybe Jan will have to correct me on this, but I drove the car for about 100 yards and I pulled over and said, I'm not even driving in this traffic. And she had to drive the car. So I learned how to live in the big city in Los Angeles.
What
It
was your
was a big help to me too.
and I don't mean to stay on Pepperdine all day, but what was your most memorable thing about being out there?
Fact that we would get to go to all the Laker games. I met Jerry West. I met Wilt Chamberlain. I got to go to practices, and I could watch them. Wilt Chamberlain and Jerry West would shoot for money. Horse, the game horse. You
Yeah.
probably played it yourself. Well, Wilt Chamberlain beat Jerry West every time shooting outside.
Oh,
Wilt Chamberlain was a great outside shooter.
yeah.
So I got to know Jerry West while I was there, and we ended up being great friends. And he worked in my camp for years, and I'd worked in his for years.
Yeah.
But anyway, Wilt was a better shooter than Jerry West, but he couldn't do it in the pros. He'd have to stay inside.
Wow. Well, see, I'm glad I stayed on that topic for just a minute. So
No, go ahead.
that's a great story. You get to Auburn in 78, 79. I want to skip ahead
Yeah.
just a bit, and it's a little bit of a slow turnaround for you. But then you get Chuck Person and you get Charles Barkley, and that really changes everything. And I've heard Wimp's side of the Barkley recruiting story, but I want to hear your side of it.
Well, it's basically true. We sold the mother on it being closer to Auburn over the mountain than it
Over the
was
mountain, yeah.
to yeah, it was closer to Auburn over the mountain than it was to Tuscaloosa from Leeds. Well, there wasn't no road over the mountain, but I didn't tell the mother that we didn't have a road. But they bought it because she wanted him to go to Auburn. She liked me.
Yeah.
She didn't like Wimp as good as she did me because I sounded country, and I think it sold her a little better.
Yeah, she didn't like the frown and grouch too much. So
No, she didn't like that growling. Wimp, he still can't get over that. That was a big loss to him, Barkley coming.
so 85, 86, you win the tournament, the SEC tournament in 85, but then 85,
Yes.
86, you take Auburn to the Elite Eight, and when you look at who you played, you lost eventually to national champion Louisville, but the
Yeah.
gauntlet that you had to go through, in those tournament games. I want to read these names off. Obviously, Denny Crum was the head coach at Louisville.
Yes.
You
Yes.
beat Jerry Tarkanian at UNLV.
Yes.
You beat
Yes.
Lou Carnesecca at St. John's, and you beat
Yes.
Lute Olson at Arizona.
Yes.
Pretty good coaches. What was it like coaching against those guys?
Well, to a certain degree, I was in awe of the guys, and especially Denny Crum because I knew him when he was an assistant at Pepperdine. I was at Pepperdine, and he was assistant at UCLA, I guess it was, and I got to know him then, so I knew Denny coming in for that. So that was really a good thing having to coach against Denny and having known him when we were in California.
Who are some other guys that you coached against? I know that there are rivalries in coaching and things like that, but and not in the SEC. But who are some other guys that you coached against that you liked? When you met
Hugh
them
Durham,
before a
Hugh
game.
Durham would have been one. Hugh Durham would have been one. Don DeVoe would have been. I was actually ended up being Don DeVoe's assistant before he got to Tennessee, but after he was good. I thought that Norm Sloan was a great coach, hard individual to like, but he's a great coach.
Yeah,
And I can't remember. Kentucky was Joe Hall at the
yeah,
time,
I beat
really a,
them.
a great coach there also. And uh, Georgia's coach was Hugh Durham. I named him, didn't I?
Yes,
I can't remember who Vanderbilt's coach. It might have been CM, but I'm not sure.
yeah. CM was Vandy's head coach. Would have been around that time.
Yeah,
Speaking of coaches, and when I think about Carnesecca, I think about the sweaters, but back in the '80s and really early '90s, I mean, you had kind of this like nutty, crazy coach thing that was going on a little bit, in
yeah,
college basketball, particularly college basketball, and that's kind of gone by the wayside for some reason.
it
I mean,
really has.
it's like what has happened to that sort of funny, nutty coach that I grew up watching. And I mean, it was just like, it was entertainment. What has happened to
Yeah.
that? Why are there not? And I think Bruce Pearl at some level, not necessarily nutty, but I mean, he lets his personality come out. You see that with him, but you don't see it with many people.
I think back in the day, you would do anything to get people on your side. I use being funny. I would go make the speeches, make everybody laugh, and got got people to become fans of Auburn because of that. And so I ended up getting this. I guess you probably heard. I ended up being this reputation of being real funny in speeches and that type of thing. So that probably helped me more at Auburn than anything else because I was able to speak everywhere and got a lot of people on my side.
You had going back to what we talked about with the Elite Eight. I mean, you had Jerry Tarkanian biting the towel. I mean, there were
Oh
these
yeah.
mannerisms and things like that the coaches had. Do you think social media has affected that in a negative way that they've gotten kind of buttoned up and they don't want to make a mistake? They don't want to say something that gets out of line. Do you think that's negatively affected the way coaches portray
Well,
themselves?
you think about this. You don't have the guys that they refer to being crazy. What was the guy from Texas that was so he loot, not loot, no.
Well, you had Tom Penders.
Yeah, a
His,
bunch, a bunch of guys that were, spoke out, were funny, and say crazy things. Coaches are afraid to do that type of thing anymore. I think they got to be more businesslike, and they got to be not say anything that can be used against them in recruiting, that type of thing. But
sure.
we would say all kind of crazy things back in the day. Bob Boyd was a lot like that.
Speaking of Coach Pearl, what's your relationship with him like?
I think we're close. It's not like we go out to eat and all that stuff, but I think he had great respect for what we did, and he knows the guys that played for me, and I had great respect for him before he ever got there. I knew him even when he was coaching in Indiana. in this, what's the name of that school? I can't even remember now, but uh, I knew him all the way up, and I knew how good he was. I knew him when he was at Tennessee, and you could tell that he had everything going for him. The ability to recruit, the ability to coach, and he's one of the best. He really is.
And
He's great with people.
I'm not in the middle of the situation down in Auburn. Again, I live in Jasper, so I'm a little bit removed from it. But from an outsider looking in, it looks like Pearl affects every single aspect of the athletic program of the city. So when you look at you can't just look at his contribution to Auburn, as just basketball. I mean, there's so much that he's doing outside of
Yeah.
that. And that is a
Yeah.
hard thing. That's a hard thing to do. Um,
Well, he's great at it. He is one of the very best at that type of thing. He can represent Auburn anywhere in any situation, and he can also do that for the game of basketball, and he can do it all over the country. He's a special coach. He's a great coach, actually.
I want to go back to your coaching career for just a moment. I've got a few more
Sure.
questions for you, but do you remember any near misses on the recruiting trail that you go, man, I really wish we would have gotten that guy?
Oh yeah, number one loss for me was Ennis Watley going to Alabama when he was such a great. He was the best guard in the state of Alabama,
Yeah,
and I thought I had him, but Wimp pulled us. he pulled he pulled the rug out from under me. To be honest,
yeah,
and he got Ennis. I thought I had Ennis
yeah.
Watley. You remember that name?
Yes,
What a
sir.
great
I do.
guard he was.
I
He was
sure do.
terrific.
Yes,
And
sir.
then there's others. I can name a lot of them. I nailed him on Barkley. I nailed him on Barkley and Omaha.
How nostalgic are you about the glory days? Do you ever just like walk into Beard Eves and just look around and kind of think about things, or maybe take a walk through campus and reflect? I'm kind of a nostalgic guy. Do you
No,
do
but
that sort of thing?
I wish I were. I wish I had been, but I don't. But that I think that would be a blessing to me if I could if I could walk into uh, Beard Eves and say, "Remember this game," or remember something like that. I think it'd be great for me over the years. But I've been unable to do that. You know, I've been unable to go back to East Tennessee State. See, I wouldn't be in college coaching if I hadn't got that job at East Tennessee State. And I never got myself involved at the places that I coached to the point that I loved the place. It was a job for me. And somebody said, I'll give you an example. Somebody said to me, he said, "Why did you leave Auburn?" I said, "I left Auburn for money. I came back to Auburn for love." So that kind of gives you an indication of how I felt about Auburn. I could not say that about Pepperdine. I can say that about William and Mary. I can say that about East Tennessee State, but I can say that about Auburn.
Mhm.
Auburn is a place that I would move back to. Auburn is a place that I would call my home, that type of thing. Even though I left, but I left for money, but I came back for love. That's the thing that I tell people, and it's absolutely the truth.
You retired from coaching in '98, and you have had a very successful broadcasting career. What have you liked most about that?
Kept me close to the game. Absolutely, that was the reason. I wanted to stay close to the game. I knew if I just become a spectator, I wouldn't go to every game. And television created, you might not go at all. You watch it on television type of thing. So the thing for me was that kept me close to the game was doing the radio, being there, doing the radio. That saved me. I kept me being a basketball fan, wanting to know the score of every game. Otherwise, I wouldn't be that way. And I think the Lord just allowed me to be on radio and on television. I loved it. and it's kept me close to the game. Somebody else said, "What else did he do for you?" I said, "He got me a front row seat. I'd be sitting up in the rafters someplace if it wasn't for that."
I've got a feeling though you're kind of a sports nut. I mean,
I am
do you watch sports all the time? Are you
all
dialed
the
in?
time. I watch it all the time, and I'm a big stock car. I'm a NASCAR fan now. That's my other love, and I have three loves other than my wife and children. It's NASCAR, country music. Is that we start out with those two. I will not tell you the others. I don't want to get too deep on this conversation here.
All right, I got one more question. I got one.
Sure.
All right. You can meet one athlete, living or dead, if you could just meet one. Mine would probably be either Mickey Mantle or Babe Ruth. I'm a big baseball guy. I would have liked to have met Mantle. But if you can meet one guy, living or dead, who would it be?
Satchel Paige, probably.
Wow.
No, let's go a little farther than that. What happened on that situation that you just asked? I got to meet those people. Jerry West would have been one. That would have been one. Wilt Chamberlain would have been another.
Yeah.
That would be one of the guys I wanted to meet. Well, I met him and I know him. Jerry West stayed at our house, worked in his camp for years. But that the two big guys for me would probably be Jerry West, and I'm thinking basketball players. Oh, I'm stuck. I'm stuck on Jerry West. Let's put it that way.
All right, that sounds good. And the last question I've got is, I know you've got a big supportive family, and
Yes.
what are the things that you like to do most with your loved ones?
My wife is kind of a semi-invalid. My whole life is spending time with her, doing things for her and being there for her. That would be number one. The other thing is my daughter lives here and my son visits a lot, and spending time with them and doing the things that they love. My son is visiting this weekend. He's coming back, and our daughter lives here in town. So being able to be with all my family and being able to love my wife and be with her. My wife's a stroke victim. She doesn't get out, but we spend all our time together.
Yeah. Well, Coach, I really do appreciate you coming on. It's been a lot
Oh,
of fun, and I hope you'll come on again. Maybe we can
oh.
have you on sometime soon. We can talk a little bit more Roan Mountain.
I got a lot of stories about Roan Mountain.
I'd love to hear.
I'll tell you about all my bootlegging partners, my daddy and all those. Next time you call, we'll do the bootlegging routine.
We'll talk about the Beverly Hillbillies, Roan Mountain, and the Lord. Thank you so much, and
Oh,
really,
anytime.
really appreciate your time today.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
All right, yes, sir.
And that's a wrap. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Tailgate Podcast. And in the meantime, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. We'll see you next time.